let's move on to another mid-century school of thought. This one that went completely under the radar in the productivity space and is actually one of the most effective things when it comes to dealing with procrastination and productivity, and that is purpose. This doesn't get talked about. In fact, we almost missed this.
Yeah.
This was a late addition to our guide and our outline.
Mm-hmm. I was embarrassed. Actually, when you brought it, you're like, why aren't we talking about purpose? I'm like, oh God. Like, it was a huge face palm for me.
Yeah. And what's crazy, so here, this is the fascinating thing, is like so much has been written on time management. So many consultants have invoiced so much fucking money over the years for time management advice. And the research and data doesn't really back it. There's not a whole lot of there. Whereas purpose, there's not a single person in the corporate world that is like, walking around cubicles, like reminding people of their purpose. Yet when you look at the research, this is like one of the most important things.
Yes.
Is that people feel a sense of meaning and purpose in the work that they're doing, right? Like if you feel like your work is meaningful, you're much less likely to delay doing it, right? Because it aligns with your values. It feels important. It feels useful. So this actually comes out, I'm not going to harp on it for too long, but like it comes out of the mid-century existentialist movement, right? Which is just wonderful and bleak and French. And that they basically said like, they start with nihilism, which is like nothing means anything.
Off to a great start.
We're all just a bunch of dirt and atoms and we're all going to die and there's nothing you can do to stop it. But from there, they make a very important leap, which is that, meaning and purpose is not preordained. Mm. So Jean-Paul Sartre had this great saying where he said, existence precedes essence, which is actually taking Plato and flipping it on his head. Because Plato said productivity is a form, a concept that we try to live up to. And whether we exist or not, productivity is always there. And it's just a question of whether you embody it or not. Sartre's like, no, dude, fuck that. Like, you get to decide what productivity is. You get to decide if it's even worth pursuing at all. You get to decide if it's meaningful. Existence precedes essence. That basically meaning is constructed after the fact. Mm-hmm. That essentially like we are all writing our own stories and we are all deciding what is useful and meaningful and what is not. And it's a simple idea. It's incredibly profound. I think it's most popularized from the experiences of Viktor Frankl. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he wrote about his experiences surviving the Holocaust. And he talks about how, it's a sense of hope and purpose for the future that not only drove him to survival, but like he noticed among the other prisoners was kind of the deciding factor of their fates as well. And so you get kind of this whole philosophical movement through the 60s and 70s of just really thinking and paying attention to the meaning that's being ascribed to certain behaviors or functions or groups or relationships. And strangely, it's funny because existentialism, I mean, it was everywhere. It was in culture, it was in art, it was in film, it was in politics. It never made its way into the business world, which is funny because when you look at the research on productivity and procrastination as an extension, people who feel a sense of meaning and purpose in their work, they're more productive, they're more resilient to setbacks, they're more willing to take risks, they're more willing to hear feedback, and they procrastinate less. And so it's just like, it's so stupidly simple, but it is worth considering, why am I doing this? Like, why do I care?
Well, do you think it didn't make its way into, say, corporate culture because it's almost antithetical to a lot of corporate culture? Because it's kind of hard. I think most people would kind of see what's going on there. If you brought a consultant in to say, okay, we're here today and from 8 to noon, we're going to talk about your purpose here in this corporate setting. And people would be like, wait a second, what?
Okay, let me back out.
Or is that too cynical, I guess? Yeah.
That is pretty cynical.
Yeah.
I would also say that it did make its way into the corporate world. It just took about 50 years. I would say with our generation.
Okay, yeah.
I would say really just in the last 20, 25 years, like really the millennials and Gen Z. Like and I remember seeing survey data around this years ago of like, one of the big things about the millennial generation is like millennials really gave a shit
Crave purpose, yeah.
what they did for a living. Like they needed to feel like their job was contributing value to the world in some way, and they weren't satisfied just getting a paycheck. And that's a relatively new thing throughout history. Like I would say it's actually a very privileged thing in history, but it's also it is purpose is productive, right? Like and if you look at all of the businesses and companies over the last 20 years, like they really push some sort of social value or cause or mission behind whatever they're doing. Everything from like the Nike commercial focusing on female athletes, or Apple being the first to pioneer like recycling electronics. And there's just so many examples from the last 20 years of large corporations who have like adopted specific missions, certain meanings, aligning themselves with certain political causes.
Right.
And it's like very much like it's not an accident. It's more profitable, right? Like it's like we want our employees to feel like they're doing something important and worthwhile. And because when you feel like you're doing something important and worthwhile, you work harder.
Yeah.
And you fuck around less, and you're willing to make mistakes and embarrass yourself because it's for some higher cause. You know who's the master of this? Fucking Elon Musk.
Oh.
Like, think about it, dude. Like, if you're an engineer interested in space, what feels more important than taking humanity to Mars?
Right.
Like, if you're an aeronautical engineer and you hear that, like you're 25 and you hear that, you're like, whatever, dude, I'm all in. Like, tell me what to do. Yeah. I will grind all day, all night. I will work my ass off. Yeah. Tesla,
climate change and
bringing the renewable economy, into America. It really is a superpower.
Right.
And it is I think it's an overlooked talent of Elon's, of like finding these kind of almost like civilizationally important causes to align his companies with. You're seeing it now with the AI stuff. Like he is pushing this narrative of like, we need an AI that's aligned with valuing human life, or else like we could all go extinct. It is absolutely existential. It is existentialism, just in corporate form. So it is
okay.
It is a super overlooked thing.
Yeah.
And I understand why it feels hand wavy and cliche. There are a lot of cliches around it, but it is a thing. And I think to bring it back home to people listening to this who are struggling just to like, eat healthy or apply for that job that they want or whatever, like really ask yourself, why do you want it? I'd say what I notice the most often is that people who are primarily motivated to do things, not because they actually care about the thing, but because they care about the attention or the result the thing will get them, those are the people who lose motivation very quickly, right? Like if you're doing something for the approval of others, that is not a sticky motivation. Like that is a very short-term motivation. So you're not going to stick through all the challenges and setbacks and failures and, false starts. Whereas if you actually really believe in a higher, like a higher meaning or purpose around something, then you will have that patience, you will have that resilience, and you will stick with it even if you don't get it right the first or second time.
What do you think too, though, about, so you're talking about purpose kind of in a grander sense, and you have this higher grand purpose that aiming for, whether it is somebody like Elon Musk and their his grand designs that he has on humanity, I guess.
Right.
Is that overcomplicating it? So too, though, for some people, because we can't all have those jobs, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking of is, I think a lot more jobs and work in general had just an inherent purpose tied to them. And it was usually taking care of your family.
Yes.
Like, so a miserable job, you could be shoveling shit.
Yeah.
And you could say, this is a meaningless job, I'm shoveling shit. Or you could say, this job allows me to put food on the table for my family, or, whatever it is. Another example, I had a friend who wanted to start his own business. He had a, pretty decent corporate job that he had and didn't really like it though. And there was no purpose behind it, but he wanted to start this business. And as soon as he decided, I'm going to start this business, the job that is corporate job actually took on a new meaning because he needed the money from that corporate job. And he needed the connections and so he started to like his job more because there was a new purpose around it.
That's awesome.
Which is insane. And it wasn't some high pie in the sky purpose that he had. It was more just like, I mean, it is treating it as a means to an end, but there was a bigger purpose behind that means to an end, if that makes sense. So I think there's just a way to, we don't all have to be engineers for SpaceX or NASA or whatever to find that purpose and to motivate us and to not procrastinate on these things.
Yeah, you don't need these civilizational, cataclysmic, existential reasons. It's interesting. I was talking to a guy recently. We did a podcast, an old podcast episode last year on my health journey, and in that episode I talked about how it was really important for me to find a way to make exercise fun. Like that was one of my big challenges is just that I hated doing it. And so I really had to find like gamification or groups or, competitions or whatever, just like keep it interesting for myself. He's like, it's funny. I've worked out religiously for 20 years and I've always hated it. Never enjoyed it. And I was like, wow, that's actually
sad.
Yeah. Well, I was like, first of all, sorry. I'm sorry. I feel a little bad for you. But I was like, wow, that's actually, that's atypical.
Yes.
Generally, when you meet somebody who's like exercised religiously for forever, it's because they enjoy it in some way or they found a thing that they enjoyed. And so I asked him, I was like, well, what drives you? Like, why do you keep doing it? And he said, oh, well, everybody in my family dies super early. And as soon as my kids were born, I was absolutely determined that I was not going to die early. I was going to live to an old age and I was going to see them grow up and I was going to see my grandkids. And I was like,
there you go.
Yeah. It's like, it doesn't need to be fun.
You didn't actually hate it probably at some level, right?
Exactly.
On a deeper level, you didn't.
Right. And I think that is the power of finding some sort of purpose in something is that it makes like the suffering in anything is going to be inevitable. We've talked a lot in this episode about the pleasure principle and avoiding pain. To me, it's like purpose is the one, if there is a hack, it's the one hack there is because purpose is the only thing that can take pain and make it feel worthwhile.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it can make you feel like, okay, that sucked, but I'm glad I did it.